everybody to our third SEM Talk of the fall trimester. I'm really excited tonight to have Dr. Elizabeth Penland with us talking about her Greek studies class. So just to introduce Liz, she is a teacher and a scholar of ancient Roman and Greek culture and ancient languages. She's lots of degrees, so here we go. She completed her AB at Bryn Mawr College and her MA Philosophy, and PhD at Yale University. She also studied at Harvard University and Humboldt University of Berlin. She has worked in 12 languages from ancient Egyptian to modern German. She has taught religious studies at the collegiate and graduate levels. And for the past 9 years, she has been teaching Latin and Greek at the high school level, first at Concord Academy and now at SEM. Liz is the class dean for the SEM class of 2025, which is our freshman class. She stays active in her scholarly work and loves sharing her joy in ancient languages and with her students. And I can tell you, we are super lucky to have Liz with us. I know that the students all love her. And now I will turn it over to Liz. I'm going to spotlight her for everybody. And thank you.
And I'll say thanks, Liz. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And thank you for everyone for being here. So bear with me while I share my screen because I think I've got this. Here we go. I think I've got it under control. 1 moment. It's always that little Zoom pause. And because I wanted to bring some slides up, I did some really nice archival work on Greek at SEM, and I wanted you, can everyone see this, the slides now? Excellent. So new directions in classics at SEM, it's all Greek to us. When I started approaching this project, I was thinking about how exciting it is to be able to offer the Greek language and culture capstone class, which really genuinely grew out of enthusiastic student and parent interest. And really, I say that, but I have data. If you would like my pie charts and my surveys, I'm happy to share. I was really, really pleased by how interested students were. And also, there have been several global languages and culture initiatives that have been building. And we've been working on global studies concentrations and citizenship and thinking a lot more about how that looks and what it looks like to do advanced work. And as an ancient studies specialist, of course, when I approached this topic, I felt like I needed to point out that sometimes new things are in fact very, very old things too. So I went to the archives and to visit Jack Item. And I wanted to see if we could dig up some history of Greek language teaching and Greek at seminary. And what I found, if I can find my, where's my cursor? No, there we go. Okay. I found the course catalog from 1844, which at the bottom, if we can, let's see, I may need to get out of full screen to navigate this. Pardon me, friend. Back to this. There we go. So if you can see, the grammar is Bullien's grammar. They're reading also Bullien's Reader, Xenophon's Anabasis, which they read continuously as far as I can tell for as long as Greek is taught, and Homer. And what's neat about following the course catalogs is you get to see kind of the progression of modern classical scholarship, because 1844 is kind of an interesting point to pick up. And then I was looking for some of the books. So this is what the books look like now that they were using. This is Dalzell's Collectiana Graeca Majora, which is for the use of young people at school. And it was published in Cambridge, Mass. in 1824. This is an actual copy that you could buy today and what they look like now. And then I asked Mr. Schweitzer for the Wilkes-Barre Academy data, and he found this wonderful advertisement for the next term of instruction that will commence on Monday, August 2nd, 1852, and that the price for a term of 12 weeks is $6 for the Latin and Greek languages. And frankly, for 1852, that seems like quite a lot. So private school tuitions, you know, that was what people were dedicating their resources towards. When I looked at the description of the department, I was really interested to see what the rationales were and when they began to justify why they taught Greek and Latin. And I really enjoyed this 1911 course catalog description of the department, that the work in Greek and Latin is arranged to meet the needs of two classes of students, those who are preparing for college and those who, without a college course in view, desire a thorough training in linguistic study as a basis for an intelligent and appreciative reading of the Greek and Latin classics. And for me, this is important too, because I feel like Greek and Latin enrich your life, whether or not they're things you plan to do in college or in your professional career, that they're just a part of of how you can organize the world. It's almost a mechanism for approaching the world in a new way and seeing a new schema of information. So that was 1911. And then when I went to the 1926 catalog, I now have some people who are really pretty exciting. I was interested to look at who the teachers were. And I found Wilbur H. Fleck, who is quite well known, and Fleck Dining Hall is named after him, of Kingston, who was a dean and taught Latin, but he also teaches psychology, ethics, civil rights. And he has a wonderful quote from the Aeneid in his bio in the 1926 Wyoming. So this is the yearbook. Be he Trojan or Rutulian, it shall be the same to me. And then also teaching with him were Rose M. Clark of Greenville, Ohio, who was the preceptress in ancient history. And I thought it was kind of I don't know, her quote of her voice was ever soft, gentle, and low. An excellent thing in a woman is perhaps very 1920s, but I felt like she didn't look particularly gentle. She seems like she has a bit of fiber. I really enjoy her profile here. And also the fact that she was teaching in the 1920s in ancient history, that she was anchoring the history for the ancient studies. And then there's a really interesting figure named Pedro Jalot, who is a polymath and who taught Greek, advanced Latin, and also Spanish. Jack Idem told me that he came from Cuba originally. He trained at Wesleyan. He was Phi Beta Kappa. He trained at Heidelberg. The Amphictyon is one of the literary societies I shall talk about. But it's just so interesting to see that he was this figure in the 1920s who really revived the study of Greek and brought linguistics to the fore and really tried to kind of give the students a sense of a wider world. And so, I mean, not that wasn't there before, but he's just very interesting. And I'm hoping to learn more about him. So then I went to the 1949 Wyoming. This is the foreign language department. So Jill, if you're still here, this is our yearbook photo, but a few years ago. And what I loved was it's still all Greek to me. And in there, in the top right, Professor Burt, in the top right of the photo, was the Greek teacher at the time. And he was actually the last Greek teacher of this sequence. So in about 49, he fell ill, and I don't believe he completed the year. And that was when Greek, I think, in this iteration was last taught formally, although I think there have been other classes, mythology classes and independent studies, that have kept it alive in between. And then going to the Greek influence on seminary culture, Jack Idem and I actually found in the archives the earliest literary societies. So SEM has 4 societies today. The earliest societies were called literary societies, and this was the Mathetean Society from 1845. The address, and again, their name comes from the Greek for pupil, mathetes, mathetu, student or pupil. And so here is an actual printed copy of an address before the Mathetean Society. And in fact, a lot of the Greek and classical training went towards rhetoric. And I should have put in my notes, and I'm happy to provide to anyone who would like it. There was a blog post that Professor Chris Francesi from Dickinson College wrote in the Society for Classical Studies blog about the value of Greek and Latin for rhetoric, and how it's not just for the language itself, but for technical language and for using oratory. And oratory was a very important piece of classical studies at SEM. And then we have the 2 societies that succeeded the Mathetean Society. There's the Amphictyon. This is when they're almost 100 years old. This is the 1950 Wyoming. You can see that I think you can see they're at the right. They should be in front of the bell tower, but it's not quite. It looks like Am I misidentifying Nesbit? Anyway, I shall have to ask Jack Idem again. I feel like I don't have my architectural.
It could be the chapel by the
You
bell
think-
tower.
Oh,
It
yeah, it's the
could
chapel,
be-
perhaps.
Yeah, I think it could be that because it looks like it's the bell tower, which was in that chapel that was lost in the flood of.
Right, that was lost in the flood. Because the earlier, I think I was thinking bell tower because the columns look the same. But
Yeah.
the early, I have an 1890 photo that I didn't put here of the same society. And I think they're formally in the bell tower. You're absolutely right, Liz. So yeah, this should be the lost chapel. Thank you. And Amphictyon comes from, take a moment, Amphictyonia, which means a league of neighbors or an alliance. So this was the literary society, the League of Neighbors, the alliance that was founded in the 1850s at SEM as a literary society. But as you could see in the 1950s, it remained an all-male society. And then the Adelphians were formed in 1865. And so this is the Women's Literary Society. And this is a picture of them from the 50s, though, not from 1865, in case you're worried about the anachronism. And again, I think they're almost in the same position, right? So they're in that chapel position from the lost hall that was attached to the bell tower. And then I was going to look at the roots, because one of the things I love about teaching Greek is that it does connect to things you know. And one of the ways to unlock Greek that's very exciting is just to think about words you know and think about the fact that they're Greek and you already know them. And so if you can work with the alphabet a little, they don't frighten you anymore. And that's part of the principle of how I start teaching Greek actually with the seniors. So here's the root adelphos, which means brother, and adelphe is the feminine form there in blue. And then it goes into English as Adelphia, meaning brotherhood or sisterhood. In this case, they're the sister society, the sisterhood. And you might recognize this next city. Let's see, where are we? Does anybody from the audience, if you can unmute, you're welcome to shout it out.
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, exactly, because it's from the love, love, phila, and phila adelphia, brotherly love, a compound of that same word. So thank you, audience. I love audience participation. It's one of my favorite pieces of talks, and we can get to the chatting. But here is the current course catalog for what we're doing now. So this is the 2021-2022 course catalog. Description of the course. This is the first capstone course. I think, Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the first one I believe that we've approved in the liberal arts recently.
I believe that is true. Yes.
And
definitely in languages it is.
Exactly. And we're very honored to have it. It's a capstone course that allows students to study classics if they had studied Latin in their junior year and finished the AP sequence then, or if they've studied other global languages. So one of the things that's wonderful about teaching a sort of a beginning or a survey of Greek language and culture, a seminar, is that it allows students to join who've completed another language to the honors level. And we do actually have a student who came in very bravely to us. I have 5 students who did AP Latin in their junior year and 1 student who came in from French. And the course introduces students to the study of the ancient Greek language and also culture. And we take the cultural components very, very seriously. Students will learn to read basic texts in the Attic dialect, compose short sentences, et cetera, but also read Greek literature and translation. So we're working through Greek language, Greek literature, and then we work also on culture and political culture as well, from the Bronze Age to the Roman period. Coursework includes it's actually several original projects. There will be a bigger winter project, but they've already been doing projects on mythology, on modernizing and modern takes on mythology. We've done surveys so far on the Bronze Age, on art and archaeology, but also on modern antiquities, trade, and how that impacts modern Greece. So this is a picture of our class. It's a reconstruction of the Parthenon, and it's this is what our Google Classroom looks like. And it's wonderful because we can just network all sorts of electronic resources that I think the early years of, we have so many things we can draw on. We have, large scale digital humanities tools. We have wonderful lexica, things that people couldn't even dream of in most libraries, let's say 50 years ago. We now have at our fingertips, which is just absolutely unbelievable. I feel very lucky to be a classicist and a person studying ancient languages and cultures now. And I asked my students a little bit about why they take Greek and what they like. And actually, so I switched these two slides. And so I'll tell you the what do they like best first, and then we'll go back to the declared majors. So what they said, what they like is that it's great that it's a capstone because they all get individual attention. Seniors do need attention too. They love the focus on culture, that despite the difficulty of the content, the pace makes it easier to learn because we're going back and forth between cultural and linguistic modules. It's a good opportunity to continue classics if you took the AP last year. It's good for Greek mythology. The class is welcoming to people who didn't take Latin. And then from one of my advisees, it's the best senior class. So again, these are from the students, not from me. I would say all sorts of things, but I was very pleased that they feel this way about what they're doing. And when I asked them, because they're all applying for college right now, I said, so what are you thinking? Oh, and I forgot, we have a seventh actually, who's in her second year of Greek. And she's the one who intends to study classics and philosophy. So this is the seminar. It has 6 students, but we have a student who began last year on an independent basis. But when I asked people, what do you plan to do with it? I was incredibly pleased. Or what are you thinking about? Just what are you intending? Classics and philosophy, obvious, connection or choice, but also environmental engineering and dance, theater and drama with parks and conservation as a minor, data analytics, psychology and gender and sexuality studies, media studies, English, and creative writing. And I was just so pleased that that's all of what you can do with Greek. So now I am going to stop my share and I'm going to allow you to ask any questions you'd like to ask.
Could I start perhaps?
Yes, please.
I have a number of questions I'd like to ask and a number of observations, but I'm delighted that Greek is being taught and that Latin is still being taught. I took 4 years of Latin at Wyoming Seminary, though I had to make a deal. I would take the 4th year if they would allow me to get rid of my science requirement by just doing it in summer school. And I did several years of Greek at college, and then also a year as a graduate student in classics and Latin as well before I basically changed and did other things. So I personally think there's nothing that's more valuable to learn than the classics. And if I had an objection to the way Latin was taught, Greek wasn't taught at the time, but Latin was taught when I was there at the school. It was taught as a intellectual grammatical exercise that would perhaps help you learn the meaning of some English words. It wasn't taught in terms of culture. It wasn't taught in terms of history. It wasn't taught as a real language. I still remember tricks that were taught us about the grammar, ara de cum exere pro praesine, to know which prepositions take adverbial absolutes. But very little was done to really make it a living historical part of our culture. So I'm delighted to see that you're doing that. So to a first question, I noticed that you said in the syllabus that basic text in the Attic dialect are read. What kind of texts are those?
Right now, what we're working on is getting some of the grammar. So we're working through Shelmerdin's Greek grammar, and I'm hoping to get them to a point where they can read basic Koine and perhaps even a little tiny bit of Plato, but I don't know if we're going to get to there yet.
Xenophon's Plato was the starting reading that I had.
Yes.
So I suppose that's
the classic. That's the classic place to go for the second year. At Bryn Mawr, we started with Plato. That was the first thing they threw you into.
Yeah, well, that's great that you're doing it. And I wondered, you spoke of one student who was talking about perhaps becoming a classics major. Do you have any over the years, how many of the kids who've gone through the program have in fact actually majored in classics?
That's such an interesting question. So I've been at SEM for 4 years, and I'm not a great representative sample. I can say that many more of my students over the years whom I've taught, especially when I started adding Greek, ended up taking it in college than I expected. So I was always surprised to have people come back and say, hey, I really did this at college. I didn't think I would, but thank you for giving me the chance to start. And Jill, I know we were looking for the language. So for the language table that we did recently, we did some surveying of classics and classics. We did career potentials though, right? We didn't do an actual survey in how many majors.
Yeah, we were trying to identify students who are who studied classics beyond seminary and or use some element of their studies in their personal or professional lives. So we're trying to identify those students. It is hard though, because like Liz said, she's only been at SEM for 4 years. So
we're still getting it. We're still keeping it going.
She does not have a very large alumni network yet.
Not yet.
But we're working on that. So yes.
Exactly.
You may find also that some of the kids come back to it as a possible major, not really the first couple of years, but in my own case, for example, I came back to Latin and started Greek only as a junior at college. That came because I found that I was fascinated by ancient Greek and Roman history. And if I wanted to go further with it, it was really important to get the languages as a basis.
I think it's so important also that they sometimes when you have it in high school, you don't know the value of it until you encounter it at college and you suddenly realize how much the training did help you. So I mean, that was one of my experiences when I went back into graduate school and found that everything was there from where I left it, because I was doing all sorts of other languages and coming back, and it was right there. I mean, early instruction is invaluable.
Last question. In the syllabus, you, among other things, having these students read some Thucydides and translate. I'm curious what parts and how much of Thucydides.
I'm trying to gauge their interest in military history. It's a hard sell. I love it, and I love putting them through some of the cultural observations and that position, but I'm still not quite sure if I can sell them on it. So I'm happy to have report back in the spring when I can tell you where we went with that. My hope was just that they would kind of pick up the lens of historiography and start thinking about what they see when, you know, whose vision of Greekness or whose vision of, you know, again, because wars have fallen out of fashion as a matrix for reading, but I find the military history indispensable. So I'll see how much I can get them to do.
I'd make a slight argument that rather than think of it or tell them about it as military history, think of it as remarkable political analysis and political history. Personally, I think the single greatest moment of intellectual awakening I ever had was to read the first part of the first book of Thucydides. That's not military, that's political analysis and diplomatic history more than military. But as much as you can get them to read that or the Melian dialogue and things like that, it's not military. It gets into much deeper political and moral questions.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I congratulate you on
well, thank you very much.
We'll have to do a follow-up in the spring.
Yes, we will, once we see how we can inspire them. Exactly.
For sure.
And certainly if you'd like to come in and tell them about your intellectual awakening, they are very open to it.
That could be a good idea too.
No, it really, they love, they're very receptive, I'm finding, to the narratives of not just why we study what we study, but then individual experiences with it. They're very powerful for them.
One of the most important things I think about classics is that all these ideas and issues that were being dealt with by people like Thucydides and Herodotus, playwrights, basically the first time they were ever being dealt with, at least dealt with in a literary sense. And they're the same issues that have gone down through thousands of years of history, and they're with us today. So there's a freshness and importance and a clarity about them. You can do it, you know, with the original writers.
Yes.
Well, I don't want to overemphasize my question. So
no, it's not overemphasis at all.
Others have questions and comments too. So let me drop back for a moment.
Thank you so much, though, for
Thanks,
sharing.
John. Any more questions? Oh, Harry.
I didn't really have a question. I just also wanted to strike a similar note of gratitude. I graduated in '05 with Liz. Um, and I just this year finished my PhD, not in classics, but in medieval music.
Feel
So
good.
yeah. But I started taking Greek in college, and similarly, like Mr. Greenwald, my junior year. So I couldn't quite fit in enough for a minor, but I was like one class shy of a minor in classics, so I almost made it. But for me, it was, yeah, being able to read these texts in the original languages, and then also the professors I had. I went to Swarthmore actually, so you
Oh
probably
yeah,
know my professor.
absolutely.
But it was, yeah, just just I don't know what it is about classics departments, but they first of all attract very unique people.
Yeah, yes, they do.
Yeah, really interesting people, and
Very
then
quirky,
yeah,
but really cool, really
yeah,
intellectually curious people
yeah,
as well.
exactly. And there's still some of my best friends from college or from people I still keep in touch with. And yeah, just how close we really became as a class, just copying out paradigms.
Common suffering.
Yeah.
In a way, but it's good stuff. I mean, but
Yeah.
it's still that those class exercises that really bring you together.
Yeah. So then I went on, I did Latin in grad school and biblical Hebrew and then all the modern languages too. But yeah, I'm really glad to see this being offered at SEM. I took French with Madame Slaff for 3 years, which is great. And like French is still my best language.
Very important. And it's early. So that's the thing. The early exposure makes a huge difference.
Exactly. But I married a French major, so that it doesn't sound good.
I'm sure it's very good if you weren't comparing it to someone else's.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's so neat to me because I am trying to weave together the history. I haven't met Justin Naylor yet, who was, it was David Johnson before me, and then Justin Naylor was teaching before David. And then I've met Marcia Costello, who is just amazing, and sort of learned a bit of that history and her view on the SEM language history. But there's just so much to learn about seminary and about how languages, but especially Latin and Greek, have been taught. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Liz, I just wanted to say thank you for doing this. And as one of the parents of one of the current students, I'm really supremely grateful, and I can report that my son is having a great time in the class, enjoying it more than expected. Loving the way that the culture is woven in, and he didn't know quite how fascinating Greek culture and history and everything else that goes along with it would be. And I think there's just something awesome about learning another alphabet, and it appeals to the code breaker as well. And really, he's remedying a deficiency in my education. So I feel like I'm getting this vicariously through him, although I'm really not getting it. I haven't learned Greek by him learning Greek. If only we could mind meld that way and I could get it. But
be careful, I might chase you with my grammars.
Yeah, well, I would love that. One of the interesting things about the class that I know from having spoken to my son and to you, Liz, is that my son is the only boy in the class. And
yes,
I think that's a really interesting development, that all of these young women are interested in classics. And I wonder if you might say something about that. And have you tailored the class in any particular way with that in mind, or why, aside from having you as a great Latin teacher, has it appealed to so many women?
It's so funny because every class is different and every year is different. So I think it was really that there were more. I'm trying to think of Daniel's year in the AP class. I think there were more So the ratio was higher towards the girls in that class. It's not always, it really flip-flops in different years. So my current AP class doesn't have that spread at all. And I think I was really surprised. I was actually very proud of Daniel for coming to the first day and deciding he would stick it out, because I was like, sometimes it can be, even if you've known each other for 4 years, it can be a little intimidating, or at least you notice it. And he does a great job. And I think that I haven't tailored the I wouldn't say I've tailored the material exactly, although I do reflect student wishes, but I have been sort of opening the door to the types of interpretations and media interpretations that they are interested in. And okay, so perhaps the fact that I did the recent LA Times article on the Bachelor as a cultural artifact and the selection of the fairest in the Judgment of Paris, that may have been a little bit pitching towards who was there. Daniel did a very good job, though, of talking about the Bachelor and listening to people's cultural critique. But it was really good. But no, I think that, just trying to teach them that classics is a living field and that it can impact so many different aspects of writing and cultural studies. Also, I've allowed in their mythology project, Daniel's quite a fine poet or budding poet, and his work has he shown you that poem yet?
He did finally.
Oh, he
Yes,
did.
thank you.
He did. And what did you think? Sorry to ask in front of
Oh.
everybody, but
Well, proud father, obviously. Right?
I
But
think
thank you
so.
for encouraging.
He did a really beautiful job. And it wasn't, trying to help students understand through writing poetry and creative work what's happening when you retell myth and what perspective looks like when you're trying to generate it and not just consume it was an exciting part of that project. So that's some of the work we're doing, actually, to try to contextualize, or at least kind of get behind the production of ancient literature and engage in some of the themes. And I thought he did a very, very fine job. But yes, I think in my comment, I said that he was doing a really good job with the gender imbalance of the class, not acting as though there were a gender imbalance. So he's doing great.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
I want to make one observation that has nothing to do with Greek, but I think Jonathan Greenwald probably experienced this himself at his graduation from Princeton.
Mm.
I attended 2 graduations at Princeton for the 2 children of John Magana who went there.
Yes.
And there is, as you may know, a senior address in Latin given at the Princeton graduation. And the text is in the program, but I was very impressed that so many of the audience, mostly students, would laugh at certain moments and applaud at certain moments. And I said, this has to be the most literate class I have ever attended, until I found out later that the students get copies of the speech with notations, laugh here and applaud. So it is a shortcut, I guess, to classical literacy. But nonetheless, I by the time the second graduation came, I was aware of what I was experiencing.
You were alert to the, I actually,
It was
that's
a
so,
con job, David.
it was a
Pardon me?
con job.
Yeah. Mhm.
I actually use the Latin oration at Harvard as an example, because I've heard several, and they actually I think they put several of them on YouTube recently, but one of the ones that I saw was someone who's major in computer science. And I use it as an example that this is someone who loves Latin, who's getting a computer science major, and who's just decided to hold the Latin oration because it's something they do and they love. And really, I think that, again, it's perhaps overemphasizing it, because it does take, the discipline and the learning and the part, really learning to do it well is part of the love of it. But I do think that love is kind of primary to the connection to the material, and feeling like you can find your way into the language that way, and that you have a right to love it and to learn it is really important. And the kids do, they keep pushing me for more grammar. It's actually, I'm like, are you guys okay yet? And they're like, no, we really want to get this. What's going on? Why is there a dative of agent? Latin doesn't do that. They're very upset with me. And I sort of go a little bit into like, well, Indo-European cases. It's pretty broad, you know, there's some things that happen there. And they're like, no, but what are they doing? I was like, well, you know, they didn't really care what Latin did, right? Oh, right. Okay.
I went to Lafayette College on
Mhm.
Saturday night to see a performance by the New York Gilbert and Sullivan Players of HMS Pinafore. And I spoke afterwards with a professor of music who had written the very interesting and extensive program notes. And it turns out that the benefactor who made that performance possible is also underwriting the appearance of the Gilbert and Sullivan Players for a spring course at Lafayette in
Oh,
Gilbert and
cool.
Sullivan Productions and such. And I pointed out to the professor that maybe I should enroll at Lafayette to be able to attend. And he said, no, there's a mathematics professor who asked me, could he attend the seminar? And he said, come on over. So I think I'm going to drive down to Easton for a number of times in the spring. So I think I'm ready to re-enroll at Wyoming Seminary again also.
The Greek
because-
seminar is also, we have spaces in the classroom.
Well, because it's so exciting to hear what you're doing. I did take Latin. I'm not certain I studied Latin the way that John suggested it should be taught, but I do remember the 3 years I took of it. And I remember when I had Clarence Bussey as my teacher, he integrated, we were studying the Aeneid, and he integrated Dido and Aeneas, the opera, and other musical works that tied into the, the study of it. And I remembered a lot of that as life went on, but there's so much you can learn. You can begin to study anything anywhere, but to integrate things of that nature, I think is one of the great joys of studying a classics.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And in fact, I heard the most wonderful conversation today because I have 2 students in my AP class who are also in Jill's. I don't know if Jill's, yeah, she had to leave for another thing, but they're also in Jill's AP Spanish. Oh, are you still? Our two, the 2 that we share who are in AP Spanish literature.
Yeah,
And
that happens a lot. We get students that make it, they study AP Spanish and Latin, or French and Latin. Yeah, they
And
pick both languages through.
and my 2 are the ones who are in AP Spanish literature, and Jane Slaff stopped them to talk about Cervantes today.
Yeah.
And she said, promise me, because they were giving their reactions, remember, from our department meeting. And she said, promise me you will read it again when you're older. Promise me that you will read it again because it's a different book.
Right.
And that, to me, I mean, again, when I started high school teaching again, I was on the same chalkboard that I had been on when I was a 13-year-old. It was the exact same classroom. I was in my teacher's classroom. And I think that it's that moment of, I still expected her to come in and say, Elizabeth, sit down. You're doing okay, kid, but you're not there yet. But those moments of, reconnection and of rereading, of re-encountering works, and really that lifelong ability to encounter them. And that moment, that ability to remember where the intellectual awakening was and why, and what that moment that just opened the world to you was. Those are so pivotal and so important. And I think that's what we're trying to give our students.
Can I ask one more thing? There's a
Yeah.
considerable controversy that's going on within the classics world right now, started basically by a young professor at my old university,
Yes.
claiming that classics has been for too long an elitist study of things that white men and to some extent white women have done, but it doesn't take into account other peoples of other colors and other societies and so forth. And that if it doesn't change substantially, it really is no longer a proper part of the curriculum. Does any shadow of that come up at all in the seminar? Is there anybody who asks a question about that, or anything is said about it?
I think that we do, in the sense that on the one hand, everyone who is in the seminar is really passionate about the studies, but at the same time, this idea that we do talk a little bit around kind of the contemporary world. Again, it's high school, so you want to kind of let them have the love be primary and then bring all of the critical questions later, perhaps. But still, this question of who framed it, who is it for, and really, is there an equal or open access to it? And I can't answer that, I would say, as a high school teacher, particularly for my students, but I try to make them aware of some of the cultural politics that classics is embroiled in. And again, finding materials can be very, very difficult because a lot of the materials haven't been updated for students where they are now. And so they're very quick to make very quick judgments about things, and they're very hip to stuff. And Claire has educated Jill's daughter is I mean, they teach us constantly on how things read and how things read to them. So I would say that even though it's not, I mean, I have brought it up, actually. I was part of the SCS panel where Danielle Padilla was accosted. So I was on the communications committee when that happened. And so I know well some of the back rooms and the front rooms of that. But I think what I've tried to help them understand without making it the focus is how lucky they are to be able to read this, how important it is to understand language, and that you don't have to accept someone's cultural framing to understand it, but you do have to honor the work that's been done, that there's always value even if you disagree.
Well, you know, there's one of 1,000 anecdotes about Winston Churchill relates to teaching of classics. Do you know that one?
I can't recall the one. If if you're going through hell, keep going. I don't.
Supposedly Churchill was giving a talk to Greek and Latin teachers at some point,
Mhm.
and he said he just didn't understand why there wasn't as much Greek and Latin being taught in the schools as there had been when he was growing up. He said that he thought that actually Latin should be taught really just to the very good students, and
Right.
Greek should be a special treat for
Yes.
the really special students. And while the audience was applauding warmly, he turned to someone on the platform next to him and said, "And then I wouldn't have had to take either of them."
Mhm. Mhm. No, exactly.
I'm
And
glad. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that there is, even though it is wonderful to have students who are really on their game and loving it and able to, bring skills immediately to bear, I do think that classics has had trouble with that mentality, and perhaps some of the methods for cultivating that have made it difficult for others to reach it. And at the same time, we're using new methods now, like oral Latin and even spoken ancient Greek, to I won't say democratize exactly, but to at least make more accessible large scale and very quick reading strategies in Latin and Greek. And those are pretty exciting too. I can't promise that I'm a wonderful Latin speaker yet, but it's been fun to go to oral Latin and spoken Latin events and see people who are, and to think about what it looks like as a language when you actually speak it as a scholarly endeavor.
Well, one of my university Greek teachers said that not many years before, he had been wandering in the backcountry in Greece, and it was very hot and he was very thirsty, and he finally came upon a peasant and he asked him in ancient Greek, because that he didn't have modern Greek. He asked him for a drink of water, and after a short conversation, the Greek farmer asked him, "Where are you from? You speak with the most strange presumably provincial accent, but I don't know where it's from." But he could understand it. So you can actually communicate in ancient Greek somewhat in modern Greece.
Yes. I bought yogurt and managed to barter for certain things with a little bit of German and a little bit of Greek in the countryside. And the first time I got myself through Italy was entirely on Latin. You can, if you have a mind to.
Any other questions for Liz tonight? All right, well, I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us, but especially thank you to Liz, Dr. Penland, for joining us tonight and teaching us a little bit about your course. Next week, just so everyone knows, not next week, I'm sorry, in 2 weeks, we have Colleen Ayers, who's on the Zoom tonight. She will be doing an art lesson.
You can spotlight Colleen.
Just real quick, we will. She will be doing heads and hands. So Colleen did one of our very first ones actually last year. And what did we do, Colleen? Horses?
Yeah, I hardly remember. Oh, horses and horticulture.
And horticulture. And I drew a horse, and I am not a good drawer. So it was awesome. But thank you. And thank you so much again for everyone for coming. But Liz, thank you especially to anyone that missed the beginning. I did record this Zoom so I can send Liz's presentation. So I will send that out to anybody who registered tonight. And everyone have a good night, and reach out to me if you would like to connect with Liz personally and ask any additional questions.
And as I say to my students, almost every class, thank you for being interested.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very
It was
much.
wonderful.
you.
Thank you.
It was
Yeah.
so wonderful to
Good night,
speak with you.
everybody. Thanks, Liz.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.